Welcome to Negro Please. I am your host, Dallas Scott, and your co-host is Hollywood Huff. What's going on, Steve?
Hey, what's going on, man?
Negro Please is what we're gonna do here is we're gonna bring minority points of views to subjects and challenge views of common perspective. And our first, what we normally start out with is what happened was. This has been a very interesting week for what happened was. Let's start with sports. All right, let's start with Kobe Bryant trying to call out Shaquille O'Neal. Kobe said if Shaq had a better work ethic, they would have won more titles.
And Shaq responded.
Yes, he did respond. You want to read his response?
Yes. If you would have passed the ball more. He said we would have had 12, talking about championships, if you would have passed the ball more.
Yeah. And then Kobe responded, it's all good, blah, blah, blah. And then Shaq responded, oh, wait, I thought you were talking about Dwight. Is that how you, and he spelled his name wrong in the tweet. And it was like, is that how you spell his name? So Shaq says you don't win championships with bad work ethic. A couple things. Shaq won championships without Kobe, and Kobe won championships without Shaq.
Right.
Shaq was such a dominant player in his era. How much work ethic did he really need?
When you look at the freak of nature that is Shaq, yeah, I know Shaq worked. I mean, clearly, like,
obviously,
because you
right.
could be that big and be out of shape, constantly.
Right. Like, look at him now. He's obviously not working.
Right. You know what I mean? But it's one of those things where you can have a good work ethic and be next to somebody who has a great work ethic. Like, I think LeBron James, before playing in the Olympics with Kobe, had a good work ethic. And then he saw how hard Kobe was working and realized that's what a great work ethic is, right?
Right.
So LeBron got better. He at least started working to be better, right? His work ethic got better. So I think Kobe probably having maximum work ethic or whatever it would be could have that perspective on
Shaq. That's a good point, because there's actually there was a conversation with Chris Paul about how they were going to play the Warriors, and he went out before the game and he was going to shoot around a little bit. But when he got out there, Steph was already on the other end of the court shooting.
Right. Like,
Chris Paul talks about how he couldn't leave the court because Steph was still shooting. So he couldn't let Steph outwork him that day.
Right.
Because Steph got there before him. So, like, he wasn't leaving until Steph left. Because he wasn't going to be like, oh, Steph did an hour and a half and I'm doing 25 minutes. He's like, no. Right. If he's working hard, I'm going to work as hard. So I could see that. But I also think, like you said, though, being around Kobe and seeing his work ethic is probably pushing Shaq to work harder, too.
Right.
I mean, and I know, in my opinion, I know people say Hakeem. I think Shaq is the greatest center of all time. If I were to start a basketball today with players in their prime, the first pick would be Shaq.
Shaq was an unstoppable force. You could not stop Shaq from getting within 3 feet of the basket.
Nope.
If he wanted to get there, he was going to get there. If he wanted to dunk, he was going to dunk. Shaq's only flaw in that area is being so great that he didn't have to develop his game. Meaning, he didn't have to develop a 5-foot jump shot.
Right.
I mean, I want to say at some point he kind of did.
Right,
you know what I mean?
Right.
But he didn't necessarily have to.
He didn't have to learn how to shoot free throws.
Other centers, Hakeem, David Robinson, they didn't have that sheer physical power to be able. So they had to be able to do other things.
Yeah. Like
you look at Anthony Davis, who is out there shooting threes. He can't just back somebody down at any time, any point that he wants to. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's just not going to happen. So, like you said, I always look at it that way. If I got to pick a team, and we can use all the players from the entire NBA who ever played of all time, and I get first pick, who am I going to build that team around? Or if we're picking just players at a position, who am I going to pick first? Because if you don't pick them, you got to go against them.
You got to go against them. Right?
You know what I'm saying? So if I don't pick Shaq, I'm probably gonna have to play against Shaq.
And who are you gonna? Then you have to take Hakeem, right? Like, I mean, who else? Because you can't take guys like Wilt, Bill Russell, because either Hakeem or Shaq, which is they're just gonna push him off the blocks, push him out of the space.
These guys are too big.
Yeah, they can't do anything with them. Other things that happened this week. Where's Quan, our producer? We got a meme we got to pop up. It's the Andrew Luck one. All right. So Andrew Luck decided to retire.
Right.
And the Indianapolis fans booed him. They didn't have anything good to say about him. And even people like Doug Gottlieb got on Fox Sports and kind of put him out there and was like, hey, this is the most millennial thing I've ever seen. And then somebody posted this meme on Twitter, actually. It was a Twitter. And I thought it was the most telling thing I've seen in a very, very long time. And it's about society today. It says this. So Andrew Luck took control of his mental health, retired, and was booed as he left the field. If he had committed suicide last night over being so overwhelmed, the world would have said if he only said something. But he did, and that's how he was treated.
And I have a beef with this, and I'm almost ready to just slap anybody that tries to justify booing this man for announcing his retirement. Football, with an argument of MMA or boxing, is probably the most brutal sport that players can play.
It is.
And I say there is an argument for MMA and boxing, but they don't have a fight every week. Correct. For 16 weeks in a row. Right. When you look
provided you don't even make the playoffs. Now you're talking like 20 weeks. Right?
Exactly, right? So it's equivalent to being in a car accident every week, and these guys get up and do it again and again.
And they have practice.
And they practice during the week.
You practice 60 hours a week for 1 hour worth of game.
Exactly.
And not that MMA players don't practice and boxers don't practice, but people who are around those sports know that like those guys take time off until it's time to train for the next fight.
Right.
Okay, I got 4 months now before I'm going to fight somebody. Now I get back to the gym and working. Then that fight's over. Now I'm taking 6 months. I'm going to keep my health. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
I'm going to try and eat right and do some things, but I'm not going at it.
Right.
A full core until I sign the next fight. And it's like, okay, I got to fight in 4 months. Let's go back in it. Football players, yes, they only play 16 weeks, but they have mini camps. They have OTAs. They have training camp. They have all this stuff throughout the year.
Then you have preseason games.
Preseason games that are worthless.
Right. So you're looking at all of this and what these players put their body through. Now, speaking about Andrew Luck specifically, he is in pain. For the past 4 years or so, the man has been battling injuries.
Yep.
Yes, last season, he had a good season. He played, and you know what I mean? He wasn't, out there hobbling around the whole season, whatever. However, he now has another injury. And they've been talking about it for over a month. He might play, he might not play. He might need a surgery. What's this got to do for the team? Everybody's on edge because they don't know if he's going to play or not because he's hurt. He's injured. Everybody accepts that. They accept the fact that this man is hurt. Now he's coming out because he's clearly found out that he's not going to be able to start the season because he's going to be in pain. And here we are, another season where he may or may not even be able to play. And he says, you know what, guys, I can't keep doing this. I can't keep putting my body through this. I can't keep taking these hits. I can't keep having this surgery. This is enough to make a non-athlete go into depression.
It is. And so one of my favorite football players, I'm a diehard Vikings fan. One of my favorite football players of all time is running back Robert Smith. And Robert Smith, over his career, I think, had 6 surgeries on his knees. And right around 2002, and this was a lot of money back then, he was offered a $15 million signing bonus by the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah.
And he thought about it, and he was like, I can't do this anymore. And now Robert Smith actually, he wanted to be a doctor. So, like, he was pre-med and all that.
I remember that.
Yeah. So, like, he's very well of his own body from being the physicalness of football and what stuff, and as a doctor.
Right. And
he said it was more important to him to be able to walk when he was older than the $15 million was worth.
You know what? I wish we could just put that on repeat and just play it for hours straight,
right.
so that these people can understand. You can't boo somebody who is any NFL player. I don't care if they ride the bench, if they play one day in the league. They will tell you the minute you play professional football, you will never be healthy 100%.
But it's not even professional football, right? Because you've been playing football since you were 12 years old.
Exactly,
8 years
right?
old.
So
your
a lot of
body
these guys
has been getting hit for Andrew Luck's 29 years old. He's been taking probably 17 to 20 years worth of hits already.
And he was probably not 100% when he signed his NFL contract.
Right.
You see, so now you have a guy who's he's not just saying like, look, I can't take these hits. These guys hit too hard and this hurts. He has documented injuries.
Yes.
Like, he's documented.
He's been taking hits his entire life, and he's like, okay, my body can't take this anymore. Like, at some point, your physical and mental health has to take precedence over money.
And we have to respect that as people.
And he's made a lot of money, so it's not like there are guys in this league, and we've known this from people like Mike Webster in the past,
Mm-hmm.
who have continually done this because they haven't made a lot of money.
Right.
And they need to have support of their families, or they made money and they lost it. So now they got to remake that money, and they got to be able to support their families in the future. They got to take care of their future.
Right.
Andrew Luck is not in that position. He's made a ton of money already. And he's very charismatic. He's going to get a job on ESPN or CBS Sports or somewhere, and he's going to be okay.
Right.
But physically, to be able to get up and just walk around your own house, we take that for granted every day.
Oh, man.
Howie Long, who was one of the greatest defensive ends of all time, I've heard him talk about how hard it is to get out of bed in the morning. Like he can't just wake up and just put 2 feet on the floor and get out of bed. Like
Right.
he can't do that because his knees are so shot from all those years of playing football, and especially back when the rules were you could be undercut and stuff like that.
Right.
Like he's in so much pain at his age now. Again, what point does money be more important than health, or health more important than money?
And that's something that people have to understand. And I've heard some of the arguments on why it was acceptable for the crowd to boo him and all this. And one guy said something to me. He said, because of the timing, like, didn't Andrew Luck know, a month ago that he didn't want to play? Or didn't he know, before, basically 2 weeks before the season starts?
Nobody said he didn't want to play. He said, I can't play.
Exactly.
There's a difference between not wanting to play and not being able to play. And I can't do this anymore.
And that's the thing. Like, and here's the thing people don't understand. You don't necessarily get to decide when your body is done with something.
Exactly.
And I think that there's not just Andrew Luck, but a lot of players and a lot of leagues and a lot of different sports who are mentally saying, you know what, I don't really want to do this, but I don't know what else I want to do. So in the meantime,
see this happen with boxers all the time.
I'm going to stay. Yeah, exactly.
We see boxers like Roy Jones.
We see it with the guy working at the post office,
right?
Who don't want to work there no more, but he can't find another job.
Right.
So what's he going to do in the meantime?
And he's 3 years away from, or 5 years away from his pension. He can't quit here.
His
body he's been carrying those mailbags around for years. The human body was only meant to do so much.
Right.
It's the greatest machine in the world, but like every other machine, it has a purpose.
And eventually it fails. And when you put the kind of stress on it that sports does, it's going to fail a lot faster than the guy who, been working at Starbucks his whole life.
I feel like we have a sports themed show today. Yeah. So TMZ. Apparently they ran into Master P on the streets, and they asked Master P what he thought about Jay-Z. Did Jay-Z portray Colin Kaepernick? And Master P was like, "Hey, Colin Kaepernick, we don't need them. Let's start our own league." I don't even know why we're talking about this, but just because I think it's funny. Like,
you know why it's so funny? Because people act like other people ain't tried to start leagues before.
I mean, like, we've had the USFL, we've had the XFL. Like, it doesn't work. What's the other league we just had? The AAFL, LMNOPQRS.
Yeah.
Like, and they went out and they went and got big name coaches. They went and got Wade Phillips and Steve Spurrier. Like, they thought they were going to have this league, and it lasted, 3 games?
Yeah, it was something like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
The games would be on. I'd see a game. It'd be like 4 people in the stands.
Right.
I mean, it looked worse than a little league, any little league game. Like you can go to a game at the park, like a pickup game, and there's more people standing around watching. I mean, seriously, the league was terrible.
And the XFL is actually trying to make a comeback, which, again, in my opinion, is just a bad idea. I think that a separate football league could work, but it has to be like the D League in basketball. It has to be associated with the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be guys who were not drafted or guys who were drafted late and didn't make the team.
Right.
And now after the Super Bowl, they're going to play a short season. It can't be a long season. It's got to be like 8 games, right?
Right.
And maybe like a 2-game playoff or something, 4 teams in a playoff or something. Nothing, 10 weeks max. Because I think the other thing they should do, and it's to develop players to get it ready for the NFL. And I know they kind of use the CFL for that a little bit, and of course that's what college football does. But there's got to be something in between there, and sanctioned by the NFL. And the other thing I think they should do with it is, it can't be in cities where there's already an NFL team.
But that's definitely like, I mean, you have so many people who are just diehard fans of their team for whatever reason. Win, lose, or draw, they're still Browns fans who right now are the hypest people in the world, really literally thinking they're going to a Super Bowl this year. But I mean, it's a new league makes no sense. And I'm all for black people having black things and us having our own leagues, and I'm all for it. I really am. However, I'm also realistic, and it just doesn't work. I mean, and then when you look
if you
at
have an all black league, who's your audience? Only black people?
You definitely cut it in half.
I mean, the NFL is what 90% black already. I mean, so you already have an all black league. Let's just be realistic. You just don't have black owners,
right?
Or black coaches. And I think that's the other thing that the NFL D League, so to speak, would have to have is take these offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators and let them coach. Those games. Yeah. Let's see if they can coach, because too many of these guys, and everybody talks about the Belichick tree. Belichick's coaches, offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators have not been successful in the NFL.
No.
Belichick's very successful the second time around. He failed once. He just learned how to fail much better.
He failed forward.
Right. So let's see if these guys can coach. You got guys like Kingsbury, Cliff, Arizona. I can't. His name just.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
He hasn't won. He didn't win in college at Texas Tech.
Well, the thing is with the NFL, and it's a good boy network. So if you're one of the good old boys, then you'll always have a job. So
how do black people get to be one of the good old boys and get head coaching jobs?
I mean
the Rooney rule is obviously not working.
And this is one of the things that I'm hoping Jay-Z brings to the table with being in the NFL, or at least starting to get his foot in the door.
How does that? But how does Jay-Z being part of the NFL equate to that?
I just don't see any other way. So I'm kind of reaching for some hope here.
Okay,
like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I really,
we shall overcome.
Do I think that I don't think Jay-Z's thing is as big as a deal as people are making it, but I also don't want to just overlook it and be like, oh, this means nothing really. You have to give it. I feel like you have to give everything time, give it a shot, and see what happens. With everything, and I feel like the culture has to change. And in the NFL, the biggest issue that I have with them is the culture, where all the players are black and all the owners are not. So they have to inevitably start letting people in, or you're going to start to see a decline. I mean, so far they haven't, in this work for them.
Yeah, so, I mean, is there going to be a decline if they don't? I mean, who's going to stop watching the NFL? I mean, they protested after white people protested. I'm doing air quotes here. After Colin Kaepernick took a knee, the NFL didn't hurt the NFL.
No,
if anything, it just gave them all the more free publicity.
I mean, when the owner share is $200+ million just for being an owner every year, it's going to take a lot for the NFL to really be hurt.
And like owning an NFL team. Is the ultimate status for a billionaire.
Yeah.
Because it is the elite of the league. It's the elite of the sports teams over baseball, basketball, and hockey.
Right.
I mean, they'll buy a hockey team, but they really want an NFL team.
Right.
There's only 32 of them available, and it is the biggest jewel in the crown. Is the NFL sport team.
Yeah.
Like, people are knocking down doors in the NFL trying to buy. We live here in Vegas. The Fertittas, who used to own, they sold the UFC because they wanted an NFL franchise, and the NFL has rules against owning other sport franchises.
Yeah.
And then they didn't get it. The Raiders ended up coming to Las Vegas, but they're still looking for an NFL team.
Right.
They're thinking about settling for a Major League Baseball team, but they want an NFL team.
You know how much money you got to have to settle for a baseball team? You know, it's not even. It's like, we were trying to buy an NFL team, but we bought the Dodgers, whatever.
I was gonna get a Royals, but I got the Bentley instead.
It's one of 12 made. It's custom, with V32 engine. Yeah.
There's a guy in ESPN that I used to like, and now I can't take him anymore. Like, and you know how like you think people are cool, and then they say that one thing, and you're just like, have they always thought this ignorantly?
I feel like that every week. At least once I come across somebody and I'm just like,
Marcellus Wiley. He's on like 5 shows on ESPN. I get it. He played football. He was a good football player. And until this week, I thought he was a good commentator. I thought he was a good personality. And then he made the comment that Colin Kaepernick doesn't understand the black struggle because he is mixed and grew up with a white family.
Oh, I don't know how much time we got today.
Dude, growing up with a white family, does that change your skin color?
Not at all.
So growing up with a white family, if you're not with them in a store, does that stop people from following you around?
Nope.
Growing up in a white family, does that change your skin color enough that when you get pulled over by the police, you're still a nigger?
Nope.
Okay. So how does Colin Kaepernick not understand the struggle?
So, and this was my thing, because I heard it, and at first, like, a big red flag went off, like, whoa, bro, wait a minute. And then I thought, like, okay, let me try to understand what he's saying. Okay, so Colin Kaepernick grew up in a house with his parents basically being white, and Colin Kaepernick is mixed, right?
Yep.
And there is a thing called passing where, a black person who's light-skinned and whatever, they could try to pass for, a white person, maybe from a distance. But if you get within 15 feet of Colin Kaepernick, I don't think you're going to think, oh, this is a white kid, So I don't want to I really kind of just don't even want to give him any credit for this, because you have to assume so much to make a statement like this. You can't assume that his parents didn't fully understand what was going on. It's really easy to say, oh, his parents are white. They'll never understand. And maybe to an extent. However, I can't believe that they themselves didn't have to go through anything raising a black kid.
Of course they did.
You see what I'm saying?
I mean, my mom is white. And when we would be out without my dad or my stepdad around, like, people looked at her like she was absolutely crazy. They didn't understand why she had all those black babies with her.
Right.
And she was, and white people really looked down on her. Like, the stuff my mom went through having black children, her own family. You know what I mean? Like, my mom's the only one it's kind of ironic. My mom is the only person in her family to have interracial kids. My dad, until recently, was the only person in his family to have interracial kids. And me being caught in the middle, the things I heard from my father's side of the family, the black folks, about white people and about mixed kids, and from my mother's side of the family about black people and the mixed kids, it's horrendous. And I'm their relative.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like we have 50% the same blood here. You know what I mean?
Right.
And the stuff that I have a cousin now who just thinks, like, he's a white guy and he just thinks nigger's like an adjective or something.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, and it's, what do you do? Like, cause we don't associate him with when we were kids, we actually hung out a lot.
Right.
Cause we actually lived on the same block as them. But as we're older, we live in different places, but every once in a while for a funeral or something, we'll all get together, or whatever. And he'll say the word, and I look at my brother, and my brother looks at me. What do you do? Like, you're gonna slap him around at the funeral or the wedding? Like,
and this is inherently my problem with what Marcellus is saying, because although he's saying that Colin Kaepernick doesn't understand the black struggle is not one specific straight one lane thing. It's so many different things. Even a black family, my black family, where we grew up, where when I was a kid, we lived in the projects. And then as I got older and my parents began to do better in life, we lived in a middle-class neighborhood. And as I'm now even still trying to do better, and I'm raising my kids a little bit better, my path has changed so many times in life.
Yes.
So
you don't think the way, like as Muhammad Ali says, if you see the world the same at 50 as you did in 20, you forgot to live.
Right. So in that path, are you telling me at some point in my life, I understood the black struggle perfectly? But now that my life is a little different, I don't understand the black struggle no more. Because I'm not.
Let's be honest. Can you ever fully understand it? Like, in your entire life, have you ever been like, okay, I get the entire black struggle? Because as you move along in life and you get a little more successful, the struggle becomes different.
Right.
Because now you looked at, like, how did he get that money?
Yeah.
Why? How does he get that? Like, did you get that job because you're the token black person?
I mean, you can literally move out of the projects and into a middle-class neighborhood, and your struggle is different.
Yes.
You understand? Like, I found myself struggling with things now where I'm dealing with black people, and I'm like, man, this dude is racist. Talking about the black guy.
Exactly.
Like, this guy's so prejudiced, I can't be around him.
Well, isn't that
You
what
understand?
Marcellus Wiley is right now? He's prejudiced, right?
He's being very prejudiced
against somebody who's a little lighter skinned than him, and because of his he's also racist, and I don't know this correct word, towards his social economical status, right?
Right.
Because he didn't grow up, as far as we know, he didn't grow up in the hood, right?
Right.
He didn't grow up next to Popeye's chicken, like you know.
And there's plenty,
Church's chicken, right?
and there's plenty of black people who didn't grow up like that,
right?
But they blacker than the ace of spades. When you turn off the lights, you can't see them. So it ain't no question on what race they are. They didn't grow up in the projects. They grew up and they might even grown up in a wealthy area. You know what I mean? But to say that like that same person doesn't understand something as someone who lives in the projects, now there might be different things that they understand differently, but I would even say the person in the projects doesn't understand what the wealthy black kid grew up going through.
My dad was in the Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
And in my opinion, black people who were in the Air Force are a little more worldly, a little more educated. Right. Because you've been around the world, you've done around other people. When they would go home to the hood where they grew up with, people thought they were sellouts.
Yeah.
They're serving their country. They get some education, and now you're a sellout.
Right.
I think that racism or classism within the black community is just as bad, if not worse, than whites to blacks.
You know why I say it's worse? Is because if somebody I don't know calls me a name, it might hurt, but I can get over it. If somebody I care about and I value their opinion, they call me that same name, it takes a lot longer to get over it.
Sure, yes.
That pain can probably ruin my life. You understand? How many times do you hear stories of little black kids being molested by a family member?
Right.
And that pain following them the rest of their life. As someone being molested by someone outside the family can still follow them, has the same potential, same damaging effect, but in general, they get over it.
The other thing that Marcellus Wiley said that really bothered me was that if it wasn't for Nessa, Colin Kaepernick's wife, that Colin Kaepernick wouldn't be like this. It's her fault. So I don't even know where to begin. Like
preach,
this
preach it.
I'm gonna bring it to. Let's go to church. Let's go to church. It's like saying that this person over here didn't believe God, right?
Yeah.
I invited them to go to church with me. They found God, right? Yeah. Does that make them less of a person because it took me to introduce them to God?
Now you preaching.
Now let's say
need an organ.
Where's our producer Quan with the sound effect there?
We got an organ.
No, like I don't understand this like if you have never eaten sushi and somebody says, "Hey, let's go to this sushi restaurant," and you go and eat sushi, and now you like sushi. Does that make you less of a person because now you like how is that? It's the same thing, right? Like if somebody brings something to your attention that you were not aware of, right, and you try something new.
There we go.
Thank you. Like, yes, he has a new experience. Life is about experiences, and experiences change you. Right. And if his wife, and I'm confused here about whether or not they're actually married or if they're just boyfriend and girlfriend.
Yeah.
But if
his spouse,
yeah. If she brought that to him and brought him to that world, what's wrong with that?
I mean,
why is that a bad thing?
And if that's your wife and she is a black woman and she is experiencing this, I would expect that you would in some way, shape, or form stand up and support. Because now, let's just say everybody in Colin Kaepernick's family is white except him, and he was never exposed to this blackness that Marcellus Wiley is talking about. Then he goes and marries a black woman, and he now has probably a black brother-in-law, sister-in-law, black nieces and nephews, a black uncle, he's married into this black family, right? So now there are people who he cares about who are dealing with things he had no idea about.
Yes.
So what's the difference? Let's just say I'm a millionaire and I marry a woman who's not. So her family is just average people. And now we've been married. I love her. I love her family. Now I want to take care of them. You know what? They're poor. They need better cars. I go buy them a car. I go buy them a house. What's the difference in me doing that for them than me taking a stand and going to protest for them? Me fighting for them, me putting my career on the line for them. So I don't understand. And we always get caught in these conversations that kind of like sidetrack what's actually happening, where Colin Kaepernick basically gave up his career protesting injustice in America. And now we're arguing about, is he black enough to do that? Who cares? Like, who cares? Like, really?
Is he black enough? That's, oh my God.
I mean, what if
I told you as a mixed person how many times I've heard that in my life? Or you don't and I'm with Colin. This is why I despise Marcellus Wiley right now, because I've heard this over and over again in my life. And when we get to what we're about to do is failed as a human being. And this week's you failed as a human being. I just, her name is Jean Cramer, Michigan woman, running for city council. And she made the comment that basically the city that she lives in is 90% white, and she wants to keep it that way. And she said that they didn't want mixed race couples in the area. If you were a black wife and a black husband, that was fine, but mixed race couples was against what the Bible wanted, and they didn't want them in the neighborhood. And then she said that in a meeting, and then the news reporters went to her house. She didn't backtrack from this. She went back and reiterated what she said. No, we do not want mixed couples here. That is wrong. The Bible says so. I'm gonna let you start because I'm gonna rant and rave and go the hell off.
And this is when people say, oh, racism is dead, racism doesn't exist. And these are the people, look, this woman don't work at Kmart. This woman is not just some random white lady who's old and bitter and retired. And, you know, every time a black guy walks down the street, you know, she yells a racial slur at him. That's not who this woman is. She is running for city council, or was running for city council until the rest of the world decided her views were unacceptable. This is when people talk about systematic racism and people talking about stuff about how, you know, a lot of people who are in our government in general are racist. And I used to always say they're not racist. They just don't care about black people because we're not on their agenda. Like we don't look like them. So usually, generally, people's priorities are people who look like them, people they can relate to. There's nothing wrong with that. Everyone's like that. We generally care about ourselves first. When you get on the airplane, put on your oxygen mask first, then help others. That's what we do. We want to help ourselves first. I have no problem with that. But that's not what this is. This is a woman who's saying, if you're black and you're with a white person, we don't want you in our community. And then she uses the Bible to back this up. And a lot of Christians can't understand why people lump all Christians into this bucket and say, you know what? Like, I don't want to go to church because of people like this. And the problem is that people back this woman up. They try to justify it. They try to say, oh, well, you know, she's old. You know, she didn't mean it like that. Like, no, she didn't just mean it. She doubled down on it when they came back. This woman is a racist. This is what a racist looks like.
But she's not racist because she doesn't mind two black people eating together.
Ugh.
It's not racism because it's not that she bothers. It's the fact that the Bible tells her that mixed races shouldn't be. So, all right. Okay, I had to breathe. All right. So, I obviously am mixed race. So, a little more of my background. I am actually an ordained minister. I don't tell people this a lot because I don't discuss this a lot because people always want to debate religion with me, and people don't understand the difference between religion and God. And I believe in God. I don't believe in religion. So I don't want to have this debate with people who don't understand that religion is man-made, and that's why every religion is a little bit different. My father is a minister. My uncles are ministers. My cousins are ministers. I come from this holy, sanctified Southern Baptist family. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
When I was 15 years old, I dated a white girl whose dad, this is such a crazy story. Like, I don't want to go into the whole story, but basically, like, he was a fan of mine. He would come to my football games. He'd come to track meets. He would root me on. And then when I started dating his daughter, he came to the school and made sure. So like when where I went to school at in Nebraska, we had two starting times. We had staggered starting times. We had a 7 a.m. starting time and an 8 a.m. starting time.
Right.
And all the athletes had 7 a.m. starting time. So you had that hour off before practice.
Right.
So you could use the extra study hall or whatever. So she was an athlete also. He made her switch to 8 a.m. starting time. They had to take us out of the classes that we had together. We weren't like, he asked the principal, like he wanted to know if we were seen together in the hallway. And the principal was like, basically, I ain't got time for all that. Like, that's not going to happen.
Right.
Like he would come to the track meets and basically sit on the side. So like we couldn't speak to each other during the track meets. Like, and I asked him one day, cause he was in the Vietnam War. And I was like, how does somebody who goes to war and is in with black people and other minorities, and you have to rely on them to survive every single day. Like you can't go to war,
right,
and you got to rely on that guy next to you.
Right.
Whether he's Asian, black, Mexican, whatever he is, you need him to watch your back and you have to watch his back.
Right.
How can you be racist? And he says to me, I'm not racist. I just can't have you guys having any kids because mixed race kids are an abomination of God.
Wow.
I'm 15 years old when he tells me this. And I'll never forget, my grandmother was actually in town visiting our family when this happened. And she my father's mother, so she's black. And she made the comment, like, I don't understand what his problem is because you're half white.
Yeah.
So this is my life right here, right? So Numbers 12, 1 through 15. We have 1 through 10 we're going to put up on the screen.
Right.
I'm not going to read the whole thing. If you want to go and look it up in the Bible, please do. This woman says that mixed race marriages are against the Bible. Numbers very specifically tells the story of Moses. Moses went and married outside of his race. He went and married a woman who's Ethiopian.
Right.
Moses' brother Aaron and Aaron's wife Miriam went to God and they complained. Why is Moses marrying this other woman? She's not part of our race. She doesn't belong with us.
Right.
So you know what God does? He gives Miriam leprosy.
Whew.
Let me say that one more time. You went to God and you complained. These people are mixing races. And God says, you know what? Don't question me. He gives her leprosy. So this is Numbers 1 through 15. I think we have 1 through 10 on the screen, but it's 1 through 15. So God doesn't want you mixing races, but the first person ever in the history of the world, as far as we know, that questioned this, God gave leprosy to for 7 days. But he was just making the point that this is my world, basically. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, you don't question me.
Exactly.
So now you're questioning, like the Bible says you should not marry people who are not in the same yoke.
Same yoke, right.
And yoke means basically religion. Like you should, like Muslims and Christians shouldn't be married. And you can kind of understand that because who's saying grace at dinner? Let's be
right. Exactly. Yeah.
So I get that. It says don't marry those who aren't equally yoked, which again refers to the belief. If they don't believe in me, then you shouldn't be marrying them. And if so I get all that. But to say that the Bible, it very specifically says the opposite of that. That you should not question that, and that we should love one another. And I don't remember Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
So you've seen this picture of Jean Cramer, right? And her horrible wig.
Yeah.
Quan, who wore it better, her or Dana Carvey? Like I don't know. Like I could go on and on and on. There's something. So we tried to find guests to come in and talk about this subject today, and we couldn't get anybody to come in. And I was shocked at first that nobody, like, because we were talking to friends of ours who are mixed race couples or had mixed children and how they felt about this. And I didn't understand why none of them wanted to come in and talk. And then finally one of them said to me, she's like, look, we all know this woman is out of her mind. Right. She said, there's nothing that I could come on the show and say she's actually mixed and married to a white guy.
Right.
She said, there's nothing I could come on this show and say that's going to change anybody's mind. She said, so it's a waste of my breath to continue to have this conversation. And she's like, we all know racism exists. We're not changing anybody's mind. It's like a Republican trying to change a Democrat's mind, a Democrat trying to change a Republican's mind.
Right.
Racism is going to be here. Like, it's not going away ever. It's been around for hundreds and thousands of years. It's not changing. And when I thought about, when we first decided we wanted to do this show, part of the things we wanted to discuss was racism. We wanted to open a conversation.
Right.
And after hearing this, I'm like, that conversation is not going to happen because people are tired of talking about it.
Well, but here's the thing, though, is people will always be tired of talking about it. But the only thing more tiring than that is when you have to live it. So, yeah, people don't want to talk about racism and this woman being racist and yada, yada, yada. However, when there are people like her who are put in positions of power and now it's affecting people who look like me, well, we're going to talk about it. And whether you want to hear it or not, I got something I have to say. There are things that have to be said and things that have to be done. Now, are we going to change a ton of people's minds? I don't think so.
But see, for every one, let's say you do change 20 people's minds, right?
Okay.
Aren't there 20 kids born into a racist family? And they're going to relearn it?
I will never stop fighting the good fight just because bad people keep fighting back. And that's the way I stand with everything. Like, I mean, if I get that, look, I'll be the first to tell you, I'm not about to argue with all of these fools. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Right,
like,
right.
there are things I post on Facebook and somebody will jump on it and go, oh, that's not right because this and this and that. You know, the police will shoot somebody and they'll go, oh, he didn't comply and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, I don't even waste my time arguing with them because I know, like, you know what? They're not. But I believe there are a lot of people on the fence. There are a lot of people who just don't know. And they have racist friends. They have people who do racist things. A lot of prejudice that's kind of slighted because they're not using slurs. It doesn't seem all that racist. So they have friends who are like, they don't know if that should be offensive or not. They don't know if that should be inappropriate or not.
And that's what we're going to talk about in another show is it actually racist or is it like, a lot of it's ignorance. People just don't know. They don't know what they're saying is hurtful. Right. They don't know the stance that they're taking is hurtful to other people.
And those are the people I think that we can get to. You see what I'm saying? The diehard racist, I'm not trying to change a Klan member's mind.
It's never going to happen.
It's not going to happen. I'm not trying to change this lady's mind. But there are some people who might think, well, I don't mind that she's racist, but since she's against abortion, I'll vote for her. Or since she's for abortion, I'll vote. There's something else that they like about her and they'll put her in office. But the racism part of it is going to hurt me. You see what I'm saying?
And I guess this is for the individual, but how do you decide which is the more important issue? The fact that, like, am I going to put this person in office that I know is racist, but there's this one argument over here that she makes
that's very important.
That's very important to me. And like, she's willing to vote for a new highway to come through town, and I think we have too much traffic and our roads are congested, so we need this new highway. So I'm going to overlook the fact that she's a blatant racist.
When you look at, and we can have this argument another day too about our current president.
We can argue that for the rest of our lives.
I know 100 people who will flat out tell you he's a terrible person. I hate his guts. I can't stand him. But financially, he's probably gonna put money in my pocket.
Yeah, there's a great when George Bush was in office. Ben Affleck was on TV and he was like, "George Bush is the worst president ever." However, he saved me $14 million this year. like he's like, I can't stand the guy, but I'm going to be honest. He saved me $14 million. And if it was all about the money, then great. But it's to Ben Affleck, it wasn't about the money.
Right.
But you know, like, you're right. There are people who think he's doing a lot of great things for veterans right now. Yeah. So they'll vote for him because they think he's doing a lot of great things for veterans.
To some people, individually, the greater good is different for everyone. What that greater good is. So most people will only look at the greater good and they'll overlook all the negatives of the people that they're voting for. That's how we end up with all these, pedophiles and whatever else in our office right now, or in the White House and everywhere else, like
flying
all throughout our
private
government.
islands to molest children.
I mean, it's sick, but yeah, that's another show too.
We got a lot of shows planned.
We're going to be busy.
All right. On to better subjects. Black Panther 2. When's it coming out?
It might as well be coming out in the year 3000. This annoyed me so much. Black Panther is coming out in 2022, which is pretty much 2.5, 3 years from now. I don't even know why they make this announcement. I really don't. I get that they have, the next 5, 6, 10 years, whatever, lined up at Marvel, and they're going to do all this. I would have been better with just hearing them go back and forth in the arguments about what they're doing with Spider-Man and Sony. I don't even want to know that. How am I supposed to be excited about Black Panther 2 when, man, my kids would be like in middle school. Like, I mean, it's so far away.
Well,
like,
at least you'll be able to take all the kids to it because they're all going to say, no, like, I get that they have, like you said, they have other movies to make, but this drives me crazy with Hollywood, especially when you have a mega hit like Black Panther was, and that was last year. So you're talking about 4 years after the original,
right? Why?
I get you had to make Avengers, but those movies were already being made at the same time. Like when Black Panther came out in the theater, it was already. You haven't even started making Black Panther 2 yet,
right?
Like, and the ones that really kill me is like the Mockingjay, the what's that?
Hunger Games.
Hunger Games, yeah. Right? So those, like, if you started, the conclusion was in episode 3, right? It wasn't like they were standalone movies.
Right.
You had to watch them 1, 2, 3. It is another movie where, like, the first one is incomplete because you have to watch the second one.
The second one, right?
So if I'm a big fan of these movies, and between the first one and the last one, there's 4 or 5 years. What if I die? I mean, is my soul going to be content? Is my soul going to wander around the earth for the next 4 years so my soul can sit in the back of a movie theater and watch this movie? Like, why leave us hang? I get because it builds the anticipation. I don't know if you've seen The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
Yeah.
I loved that movie. It took them almost 8 years to make the second one. And I haven't seen the second one because I don't want to wait another 8 years to see the third one.
You know what's funny is I saw the first one and my wife didn't see it. So when the second one came out, like we now have both movies at home. And we haven't watched it because she wants to watch the first one. The thing is as much as I want to see the second one, I can't even remember what happened in the first one. Right. It was so long ago.
The only thing you remember from the first one is the baseball bat scene. Because everybody,
you know what I mean? That's it.
Because that was so like, oh my God.
Like, and I'm sitting here because when I remember seeing a trailer when the second one was about to come out, and I kept thinking, is that girl from The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo? It's not the same girl though. Like, and that's what I was thinking. The movie, the way that it's shot and filmed, it looked like it, and I kept thinking, is that her? Is that her? And I'm like, that's not her. This must be a different movie. And then I see the title, and I'm like, wait, that's supposed to be a sequel. And now I'm so confused because everything happened so far away.
Yes.
And I'm pretty sure, like, in the movie, they might explain why it's not the same girl because it could be a whole different character. Like, I didn't read the books. I don't know. But the first movie was great. The second movie was so far away. It's just...
You almost think it's a separate movie.
Yeah.
You don't know that it's really part of this 3 books. You know,
right.
Like, because it was so far away. The other thing big that happened this week was Dave Chappelle.
Oh, yeah.
Sticks and Stones. I have not seen all of it yet. I've seen part of it. I have not seen all of it. You think it is the greatest stand-up thing of all time?
I think it's definitely, off the top of my head, without thinking about anything else, it's definitely top 3. Dave Chappelle, to me, is the funniest comedian alive right now. Of all time, maybe next to Richard Pryor, but I think Dave Chappelle is the funniest guy alive right now. This stand-up, I don't know if it was his content. I don't know if it just felt like it was from the heart, but instantly from the way he opened it up, talking about Anthony Bourdain to just going all the way through to the end, I could not stop laughing. There was one point where I just had a couple giggles and chuckles, but I was laughing hard directly all the way through it. And I just felt it. I can't even put my finger on what it was, which I think is just the genius of Dave Chappelle with everything that all the topics that he hit and the way he talked about it. These are things that people don't like to talk about. And he hit the nail directly on the head and made it funny.
So I've seen about half of it. I just haven't had time to finish it. And it's incredibly funny. It is very, very funny. But you said Dave Chappelle is the funniest comedian right now. I got to think about that. And I feel like, and we're going to find out here in the next year how funny he really is, because Netflix just paid him $70 million. To me, the greatest stand-up of all time is Richard Pryor. Live on the Sunset Strip is the greatest bit of stand-up ever.
Richard Pryor is definitely, of all time, probably my number one. I can't think of anybody who could top that.
He's not live.
Right.
George Carlin I mean, he's so far ahead of the political game. I mean, he was talking about what we're talking about now. He was talking about in the 70s. Like, he's so far ahead.
Yeah.
And it was funny then, and it's even funnier now because you're like, damn, he must have had a C9 class. Yeah, because he was way into the future. Then Robin Williams, to me, was just crazy genius, like his thought process. And he could act physically into his comedy. He could add, so he was a very physical comedian. So to me, he's up there.
Robin Williams is one of the few people who is really good at stand-up, really good at movies, really good at sketch comedy. Most comedians, they're really good at one thing, and they're just kind of all right doing the other stuff.
You're right.
Robin Williams was probably...
And he did all kinds of, like, if you've seen Photo Booth where he played the serial killer, like, he was very diverse. Robin Williams is probably...
really good.
One of the most talented actors I've ever seen. But they're all past.
Yeah.
But you said that he is the greatest comedian alive. And I have to take note with that because Eddie Murphy's still alive. And we don't give Eddie Murphy credit because he's done a lot of horrible movies. But as Eddie Murphy says, they weren't horrible because they paid me $20 million a piece to do them.
Out of sight, out of mind. Right. Is why I say
Delirious
right
and Raw stand up there with every stand-up show ever.
And that's why I said off the top of my head without really thinking about it, because I knew something would come up. You know what I mean? So, but this is what I'm saying. Like Eddie Murphy, my argument for that is we just haven't seen him in 20, 30 years doing stand-up. 40 years at this point.
And networks just paid him $70 million to do stand-up.
But yeah, he's got a movie.
And we'll find out if Eddie can still do it. And I'm anxiously awaiting this.
Yeah.
Because when I was in 6th grade and Raw came out, Foonie Foo Foo, ice cream sandwich or ice cream cone, like all of that was 30 something years ago, and it's still fresh on my mind. To me, that was absolutely, like I said, Live on the Sunset Strip is number one, but Raw was number two. And then there's a couple things that George Carlin and Robin Williams have done that fit in there. Right. Like, I'm not a big fan of a lot of modern comedians. Like, Dave Chappelle talks about Louis C.K. and their friends, and talks about. And I'm a firm believer in that there's white humor and black humor.
100%.
And that's not racist. I think it's just true. There are things that black people, we grow up in our culture.
Our culture is
and there are things that are funny for us.
Right.
When I see things from white culture that I don't know, even though my mother was white, it's not funny to me. And I see other people laughing at it, and I'm like, that's not funny. Like, I'm like, there's a lot of other, I'm sure they're good comedians. I just don't get their humor because I didn't grow up in that culture.
Right.
So I don't understand. And there's guys even now who like do shows from New York and they talk about things that are funny in New York City. And I'm like, I grew up in the Midwest. I don't get it. I don't get that, So like, it's not funny to me. And that's nothing against them. I just don't know the culture and I don't get it. So,
right.
Yeah. But I am going to go home now and finish watching the rest of Dave Chappelle's show, Sticks and Stones. I am Dallas Scott. He is Hollywood Huff. This has been Negro Please. We will be back next week, and we will talk about what happened was. There's always something to talk about. It's life is full of stories.
Yes.
Thank you guys for joining us. See you next week.
Once I blow your mind, you're not keeping your head. I bomb the scene, killing off your rhyme machine. You took it back like a time.